You'd need to sink America's newest aircraft carrier 3 times before it actually goes under. Sounds impossible, right? The USS Gerald R. Ford isn't just a ship. It's a floating city designed to laugh at everything the ocean and enemy militaries can throw at it. But nothing's truly unsinkable. Ask the Titanic. So what would it actually take to send America's $13 billion warship to the bottom? Stick around, because the answer is way more insane than you'd think. Let's get one thing straight first. The Ford isn't some oversized yacht with a runway bolted on top. This thing is 1,106 feet long. That's longer than the Eiffel Tower is tall. It weighs 100,000 tons fully loaded. That's the same as 14,000 elephants. Or if you prefer, about 50,000 Honda Civics. Every inch is packed with systems designed specifically to keep this beast floating no matter what hell breaks loose. The hull alone is something out of a nightmare for anyone trying to sink it. We're talking about high-tensile steel between 1 and 2 inches thick. Not everywhere, mind you. The really important bits, the sections below the waterline protecting the machinery spaces and magazines, they're even thicker. And it's not just one hull. The Ford has multiple watertight compartments. Over 3,000 of them to be exact. Here's how that works. Imagine trying to sink a giant ice cube tray where each section is sealed off from the others. You punch a hole in one cube. That cube fills with water. The other cubes, they're fine. They keep doing their job. The Ford works the same way. Flood one compartment. The ship just shrugs and keeps going. You'd need to breach multiple compartments simultaneously. And even then, damage control teams are already running toward the problem before the water's ankle deep. These aren't your average sailors with mops and buckets either. Damage control on a carrier is a full-time specialty. They train constantly. Fires, floods, chemical leaks, battle damage. They've drilled for everything. The Ford has firefighting systems that would make most city fire departments jealous. Foam systems, sprinkler systems, halon gas for electrical fires. There are emergency pumps that can move thousands of gallons per minute. And if the main pumps fail, there are backup pumps. And backups for the backups. But let's say you're really committed to this sinking business. You're not just going to sail up and start whacking the hull with a hammer. You need weapons. Big ones. Let's start with the obvious choice. Torpedoes. A modern torpedo is basically an underwater missile with a brain. The heavyweight torpedoes used by submarines, like the American Mark 48 or the Russian Type 65, carry warheads between 500 and 1,000 pounds of high explosives. Some of them don't even hit the ship directly. They're designed to detonate underneath the keel, creating a bubble of gas that causes the ship's own weight to break its back. It's called a bubble jet effect, and it's absolutely devastating to smaller warships. Key word there, smaller. The Ford aircraft carriers are built with this exact threat in mind. The double hull provides standoff distance. The inner hull has a fighting chance. Plus, remember those 3,000 watertight compartments? A single torpedo, even a perfect shot, is flooding maybe 3 or 4 compartments max. The ship lists slightly. The carrier keeps operating. So fine, one torpedo isn't enough. How many torpedoes would it take? Here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean expensive and complicated. To guarantee a kill on a Ford-class carrier, military analysts estimate you'd need somewhere between 20 to 30 torpedo hits, spread out across the length of the ship, targeting different sections to overwhelm the damage control capacity. Let's put that in perspective. A modern attack submarine carries maybe 24 to 30 torpedoes total, and that's for its entire deployment. It's not firing all of them at one target, so you'd need multiple submarines, perfectly coordinated, all getting within firing range without being detected. Oh, and they'd need to survive long enough to launch. More on that nightmare in a minute. Maybe you're thinking bigger. Missiles. Anti-ship missiles have been the boogeyman of surface navies since the Falklands War. The Soviet-era Moskets, the Chinese DF-21D carrier killers, the new hypersonic Zircons. These things scream toward ships at multiple times the speed of sound, carrying warheads that can weigh over 1,000 pounds. A single missile hit on a destroyer? That's a mission kill at minimum, possibly fatal. But the Ford? Different story. The superstructure, that island on the side of the flight deck, yeah, a missile there causes chaos. wrecks radar systems, kills the command staff if they're unlucky. But sinking the ship, you're not even close. Most anti-ship missiles are designed to hit above the waterline. They're going for the superstructure or the flight deck. Minimum effort to punch through. You need to get below the waterline. You need to flood enough compartments that the ship loses buoyancy and can't recover. That means multiple hits in specific locations. And it means overwhelming the defensive systems first. Speaking of defensive systems, let's talk about why getting even one missile or torpedo to the Ford is harder than landing a rover on Mars. The carrier doesn't sail alone. Ever. It operates as the center of a carrier strike group. And that group exists for one purpose: keep the carrier alive. A typical strike group includes 2 guided missile cruisers, like the Ticonderoga class. Each one is loaded with 122 vertical launch cells carrying SM-2, SM-3, and SM-6 missiles. Those are anti-air, anti-ballistic missile, and anti-cruise missile interceptors. They can engage targets over 150 miles away. Then you've got 2 or 3 guided missile destroyers, the Arleigh Burke class. Another 90 to 96 VLS cells each. They're running Aegis combat systems that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously and engage dozens at once. Before you even get close to the carrier, you're going through a layered defense that would make a medieval castle jealous. The outer layer, that's the SM-6Es and SM-2Es from the cruisers and destroyers. Engagement range of 150 miles or more. 8 of them are getting swatted down before they're halfway there. The survivors press on. Now they're inside 50 miles. This is where the evolved Sea Sparrow missiles come into play. Faster, more maneuverable, designed specifically for close-in threats. Still coming? Inside 10 miles now. The close-in weapon system, affectionately called CWIS or CWIS, takes over. These are Gatling guns that fire 4,500 rounds per minute of 20 mm tungsten penetrator rounds. The radar tracks the incoming missile, calculates an intercept, and throws up a wall of lead. At this range, against subsonic missiles, CWIS has a kill rate of over 90%. And if something gets through all of that, the Ford itself has 3 CWIS mounts, rolling airframe missile launchers, and electronic warfare systems that can jam or decoy incoming threats. You're not landing one missile. You're trying to land 30 or 40 simultaneously to saturate the defenses, and you're hoping the defenders have a really bad day. Oh, and let's not forget the submarine escort. There's always at least one attack submarine, usually a Virginia or Los Angeles class, running somewhere between 50 and 200 miles ahead of the strike group. Its job is simple: find enemy submarines before they find the carrier. Modern attack subs are stupidly good at this. Their sonar can detect another submarine from dozens of miles away in good conditions. And they're carrying those same Mark 48 torpedoes we talked about earlier. So your attacking submarine, it has to sneak past a submarine that's actively hunting for it. Evade the P-8 Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft flying overhead with sonobuoys and magnetic anomaly detectors. Avoid the surface ship's active sonar. Get within firing range. Survive long enough to launch and then escape. The odds are not great. But let's say you pull off a miracle. You've coordinated a massive strike. Multiple submarines. A barrage of cruise missiles. Maybe even a few ballistic missiles for good measure. You've overwhelmed the defenses. You've landed 15, 20, 25 hits on the carrier. Fires are raging. The flight deck looks like Swiss cheese. Several compartments are flooding. This is it, right? The Ford is going down. Not yet, because now we get to talk about the absolutely absurd engineering that makes modern carriers almost impossible to sink. The Ford has 4 A-1B nuclear reactors. These aren't like the reactors in older carriers. They're more efficient, more powerful, and more resistant to damage. As long as the reactors are running, the ship has power. And with power comes pumps, fire suppression, ventilation, everything the damage control teams need to fight back. The ship can lose 1, maybe 2 reactors and still generate enough electricity to operate. The propulsion system is redundant. 4 shafts, 4 propellers. You can lose 2 and still maintain 20 knots. The rudders are split, multiple units, redundant steering systems. You're not disabling the ship's ability to maneuver without catastrophic damage to the stern. And here's the really crazy part. The crew. There are over 4,500 sailors on a Ford-class carrier. In battle stations, several hundred of them are dedicated damage control personnel. They're organized into teams, each responsible for specific zones. They have maps showing every pipe, every valve, every bulkhead. When flooding starts, they're not panicking. They're following procedures that have been refined over a century of carrier operations. Flooding in compartment 340-52L. Start the pumps. Shore up weakened bulkheads with wooden beams and metal plates. And if necessary, they counterflood compartments on the opposite side to maintain the ship's balance. Fire in the hangar bay. They seal it off. Pump in foam or halon. Vent the heat and smoke. And if it's really bad, they can flood the entire hangar deck with seawater. It ruins millions of dollars in aircraft. The U.S. Yorktown at Midway took 3 bomb hits and 2 torpedo hits from Japanese aircraft. Everyone thought she was done. She was listing on fire, dead in the water. Damage control teams worked miracles. 3 hours later, she was underway again at 20 knots and recovering aircraft. She eventually did sink, but it took 2 more torpedo hits from a submarine 2 days later. And even then, she took 15 hours to go under. The Yorktown was built in the 1930s. The Ford is 90 years of engineering advancement beyond that. The metallurgy is better. The damage control systems are better. The compartmentalization is better. Everything is better. So let's get hypothetical. You want to sink the Ford. What's your actual best bet? You need a coordinated strike that the world has never seen. Multiple nuclear attack submarines launching simultaneous torpedo spreads from different directions. Salvos of supersonic or hypersonic anti-ship missiles. Dozens of them. Time to arrive within seconds of each other to saturate defenses. Maybe air-launched munitions from stealth aircraft, if you can somehow get them past the combat air patrol. And you need to do all of this while somehow neutralizing the strike group escorts, defeating the electronic warfare systems, avoiding counterstrikes, and hoping that none of your submarines get detected and sunk before they can fire. You're looking at an operational plan that would require the resources of a major military power and near-perfect execution. Even then, even if you land 30 or 40 hits, you're probably not sinking the carrier outright. You're disabling it, forcing it to withdraw, rendering it unable to conduct flight operations. It becomes a floating hulk that has to be towed back to port. But actually sending it to the bottom? Fires and system failures that the crew is fighting against every single second. China's DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles are often called carrier killers. They probably are. A ballistic missile warhead, coming in at Mach 10 is tough to stop. But even these weapons are designed more for mission kills than sinking. Hit the flight deck, destroy the catapults and arresting gear, wreck the island. The carrier can't launch or recover aircraft. Mission accomplished. It doesn't need to sink. Russia's Kinzhal hypersonic missile, the Zircon. These are similar, but they're carrying warheads in the 1,000-pound range. That's enough to cause catastrophic damage above the waterline, below the waterline, against that compartmentalized hull with damage control teams ready to respond. It's a different calculation. The honest answer is that no single weapon system in existence today can guarantee sinking a Ford-class carrier. Not one. You need multiple systems, perfectly coordinated, executing a strike that would cost billions of dollars in weapons alone and potentially dozens of aircraft and submarines. And you'd be doing this against a target that's actively trying to kill you back. With an escort group that exists solely to ruin your day. There's a reason the United States has maintained carrier dominance since World War II. These ships are phenomenally difficult to sink. They're not impossible, but the resources and coordination required are beyond what most nations can bring to bear. And the ones that can are also the ones with nuclear weapons, which changes the calculus entirely. The Ford was designed to survive. Every system, every redundancy, every piece of training the crew receives, it all points toward one goal: stay afloat, keep fighting, don't let the enemy win. And after $13 billion and decades of engineering, they've built something that comes pretty damn close to unsinkable. Not because it can't be done, but because doing it requires a level of military coordination and resources that borders on science fiction. So there you have it. What would it take to sink the USS Gerald R. Ford? Everything you've got, and then some. And even then, you'd better hope the crew's having a really bad day. Because if they're not, that ship's going home under its own power. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button. We've got more naval deep dives coming your way.